I speak to you in the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Good morning. Wonderful to see marvelous St. Paul's. Our first, Sheila and my first Sunday back from sabbatical, and we get to be with you. It's a wonderful thing. And with your wonderful new rector. It all happened while I wasn't looking. And that's a good thing. Our presiding bishop, the inspiring Michael Bruce Curry, the royal preacher, likes to talk about us being the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. Some of you haven't heard that. The Jesus movement. And I'm with him. It's so refreshing to have a person of his, as I called him on a BBC interview after the royal wedding, an incandescent preacher, and they heard me say incandescent creature. It's so refreshing to have a person so in love with Jesus Christ and ready to share the love of Jesus with all. However, I wonder if sometimes when we emphasize Jesus, we think we're talking about the person who walked in Nazareth, or in this case, in the Galilee, near Tyre and Sidon, and not Jesus Christ, who was that person and yet is the Spirit that pervades the world. That is, in this case today, do we think, because we emphasize our brother Jesus, that we're talking about a biography when we read the gospel? If somebody asked you, as they should, to tell them who is Jesus, would you start and recite a biography? Well, it was about 33 AD. And there was a peasant, and so on, unfolding what little we know about his biography. Or would you tell the saving work of Jesus Christ in your life? That is, who he is to you. I think that's what we would do. That's what people need to hear. How did Jesus Christ change me? How did he save me? How did he help me? And so when we hear a story like today's story from the Gospel of Marc, a remarkable, remarkable piece of the Gospel, I, at least, am tempted to think, here is a kernel of biography. It's very earthy. It begins with a story of Jesus encountering a Hellenistic woman, a Gentile from a Syrophoenician origin, who has a child with an unclean spirit. And Jesus, can we say, was not at his best moment in this encounter. He tries to send her away. He says he's for the Jews first, and after they have been fed. And when would that be? Then he would be for everybody else. And yet, none of us are Jews. We are all the people to whom the Spirit of God was spread abroad and for whom he was meant, as well as for his own people. He wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. And we have this little glimpse of him being helped by this woman. Immediately, it goes from there. He leaves Tyre, goes to Sidon, to the area of the Decapolis around the Sea of Galilee, and there we have another earthy, biographical kind of encounter. He's like a shaman in this story. He puts his fingers in the man's ears. He spits and puts saliva in the man's ears, and then on his tongue. Then his ears are opened, his impediment in his speech is gone, and he speaks. This is not the Sunday school Jesus. This is a little biohazard. This is not, this seems like we're getting a little kernel of the biography. But I would be mistaken if I thought that. It is, yes, who Jesus was, Jesus of Nazareth, and also this is of the Spirit of God. This is of the Spirit of God. This, we must say, is a spiritual healing. There's no medical technology in here. There's no biology. This is not the area that Sheila Andrus would be working in as a biologist. Any of you as nurses or as medical technicians or as physicians, none of this is accepted practice. The way he healed. And here's something I want to say. A spiritual healing has spiritual effects. A spiritual healing has spiritual effects. In other words, this is not just about hearing or speaking. There is a spiritual dimension in this. We can see this in the portion of the epistle from James that was read before the gospel, in which we understand that richness, being rich, is not equated with material. What he says is that the poor, the materially poor, are in fact spiritually rich. It is easy to be deceived by the appearances of the world. To take the material for the spiritual as some kind of sign of wisdom or lack thereof, of kindness or lack thereof. And yet what we're talking about is fundamentally God's world and the meaning of what that is. What is the Spirit of Christ? What is the reality that goes with allegiance to that? What is it to live in the beloved community? What we might call the kingdom of heaven. And so, when Jesus says, be opened, he's not just talking about healing the man's ears. He's not just saying that whatever was impeding his speech physically is gone. He's talking about being open. Being open. As a way of living. And may I say, in that regard, he is doing the most profound healing that can be done. There is a little chant that is very popular in the Episcopal Church. It was set to music, 3 words, by Ana Hernandez, an Episcopal musician on the East Coast who's been many times in our diocese, a dear friend of our diocese. Ana took these 3 words, which are a Buddhist prayer, to the goddess of compassion, Kuan Yin, and she set them to music. And these 3 words, the whole text of the song and the prayer are, open my heart. Have any of you sung it or heard it? It's very beautiful. Hey choir. You've all sung it. It's so beautiful. And if you come on Wednesday to Grace Cathedral for the beautiful multi-faith service as part of the Global Climate Action Summit, you'll get a chance to sing it. It's very beautiful, and it's a profound prayer. It's prayed all over the Buddhist world. Open my heart. How much do I need that? How much do I need Jesus to put his fingers in the ears of my heart and say, be opened for me to hear? Corelli's Mandolin, do you remember that? It was both a movie, very popular, and a novel. There's an example, a comic, high comic, kind of reminds me of Faulkner, at the beginning of this novel that speaks about what does being open, hearing, mean a healing, at the physical level, as well as at a kind of emotive, social, spiritual level. And it goes like this. There is an elderly couple on this Greek island. This is at the beginning of World War II. And this elderly couple, the men, they're in their 80s, and they've known each other, they've been married for many, many decades. They've known each other since childhood, the man and the wife. And the man has always been deaf in his left ear, since he remembers. And so they've accommodated that. He turns a deaf ear to many of his wife's comments. But his ear starts to hurt. And they go to the doctor, who actually doesn't have a medical degree, but they don't know that on the island. He is their physician. And the doctor roots around in this ear that has not had the kind of Q-tip attention that modern America might, think is good. And there at the base of all that, of many, many decades of living, he finds a pea, a dried pea, that probably was shot from a pea shooter by one of his 3 or 4-year-old friends, embedded itself in his ear, and had been there ever since. Everything had accreted around that. So the physician thought to himself, I'm going to do a little miracle here. And so he made him lie down with his head on a shelf, and he put some alcohol in it, and he made him stay there for hours, and he said medical things about the ear's condition. And then, after it had had time to soak and so on, he just quietly and without them seeing it extracted the pea, and presto changeo, he could hear. That's the physical part. That's the physical part. In 2 weeks, the couple came to him mad as hell. Because all their accommodation of each other no longer worked. He couldn't turn a deaf ear to the things his wife had to say to him, which were strong in their content. And then they were coming to him saying, why did you do this? You've messed things up. We just asked you to make the pain go away, and now he can hear. He's open, but not really. And she's open, but not really. And so then he had to kind of talk to them about how to move forward, how to live together in their 80s as if they were in a new relationship, newly born, open to each other in a new way. Well, brothers and sisters, do we not live at a moment in our national and world history, maybe even our local history, when we need to be opened? When the barriers between us, which have become quite solid seeming and immovable, need to be healed. What do you think? It's what I see every day. And it's easy to believe that this is beyond healing. That our Congress is beyond healing. That our national life together as a people is beyond healing. But this is why it's not a biography of Jesus. It's a story about a Savior who can do all if we have faith in him. To believe that Jesus can open us, open our hearts, the ears of our hearts. And then we can speak truly. This is the beginning of healing. As you know, Sheila and I work deeply in the area of climate change and environment, and it's a bad moment. It's a tough moment for our world, and it's going to get harder. 35 years ago, Sheila and I made a journey with dear friends in a prayer group in southwestern Virginia, Blacksburg, Virginia, all the way up to D.C. to hear a Cistercian monk, Basil Pennington, who is one of the founders of the centering prayer movement, speak. And he said, as a contemplative, a person who prays quietly to the presence of the healing God of the universe, that even though he believed that scientifically it was true that the world might come to an end as far as human beings might go, he yet had hope and faith that God would bring us through even that kind of cataclysm. Beyond understanding, without passivity on our part, giving up and just saying what will be, rather trusting and giving ourselves with all we have, once opened, to speak and act compassionately and truly in the world. The window, as Christiana Figueres says, on climate change has just about closed. We had 5 years to prevent the worst effects for our children and all generations of climate change from coming true, and that window has almost closed. And yet she said, I have hope. If we open ourselves, believe and trust, and move forward in that hope, that can happen. And it is equally true for our life together, the healing of communities, the healing of a people, the healing of a democracy. All this is doable by the God who loves and holds the universe in his hands and says, be open.